Hey everyone, Fuseman Kamacha, and today I have a quick little tutorial on how to build a 360 video player for anything from CV1, Vive, or DK2 like I have here, all the way down to say Gear VR or on my Android phone just Google Cardboard or Daydream. And so the reason I want to show this is twofold. So one, I think it's like a really good learning experience for playing around with Unity a little bit and getting something really simple and powerful going right off the bat. And then two is because you can customize it, and that's something you can't do with YouTube or any other video player. So you can see here, got some nice particle effects, so if this was a snowy environment, it would work really nicely. But without further ado, let's get started. Awesome. So to get started, we actually have a couple of options. So the first being the Easy Movie Texture Unity asset. And so this is $65, but it's really nice in that it lets you use it for iOS, Android, and if you actually scroll through the description, he also has a editor mode that you can use to view movies when you play them in Unity, and then that'll transfer over to mobile as well, and you can also use that for the PC. So super cool asset all around, but one downside, of course, is $65. So there is another option, and it's kind of a little hidden, and it's actually in the Oculus Sample Framework. So this is a free thing that you can download from the Oculus website. I'll put a link to that on our website and then in the description of this video. But you can go ahead and download this here, and it's basically the open source version of an app that they put out for the Rift and for the Gear VR. So you can play around with those, and it has like just a bunch of sliders to play around with some of the effects and how that affects the VR experience. But yeah, you can go ahead and download that, and that's what we're going to be using in this video. And so I've actually already gone ahead and done that. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and pop open Unity. And I've actually kind of already opened it up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and click that. And since I just reset the project, it's going to ask me to update to the latest version. So I'm currently on 5.4.0f3, and that's the latest stable build. I think it still has some issues, especially with movie playing, but for everything in this video, it should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue, and this will take a little bit of time to actually go ahead and update. So I'm going to cut here, and then I'll see you after this is done. Alright, so now that it's finally opened up, you'll see a bunch of different files here in the project tab. What we're specifically interested in is if you go to sample scenes, into rendering, and then movie player, there's a movie playing scene. And so this is basically kind of like Oculus Video or like Oculus Social, where you just have a flat screen on there. But the neat thing about this is that it actually works in Android as well as on the Rift. And so basically PC and mobile. So that I think is the really neat feature about this framework. So we could just go ahead and hit play really quickly. It'll load up. Kind of annoying, but whatever. And so that's all done here by this movie surface. So we're basically going to be using this plugin basically to go ahead and create a spherical video. But we can't do that just with Unity alone. So what we're actually going to need to do is go into Blender. So go ahead and open that up. And what we're going to do here is just quickly create a sphere that we're going to be using to render our 360 video onto. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and delete the cube, the camera, and this lamp. Just kind of get a flat scene here, and then go ahead and hit create. And we're going to want to get the icosphere. So this is what an icosphere looks like. And so down below is the settings that we do when we add the icosphere. So what I'm going to do is set this subdivisions to 6. Keep the size as 1. Make sure to hit generate UVs, because otherwise we can't actually texture it. And location set to 0, rotation, that's fine. Now, why do we have to do this? Because Unity has its own sphere. And the reason is, if we actually go click here, so this selects the icosphere, and if you hit W, it brings up the edit menu. And what we actually want to do here is the setting called flip normals. And so this is basically how Unity or any 3D modeling object is going to render our sphere. So normally you'll have a sphere here, and you'll have the normals going out. And that basically means that you'll see the outside of the sphere, but you'll never, if you're looking from the inside out, you'll never see the inside of the sphere. So when we click flip normals, we flip it inside the sphere. So now we can actually see the inside, but we won't be able to see the outside. But that's exactly what we want for a 360 video player, because we'll be inside the sphere and looking around. So it's perfect. And that's really all we need to do in Blender. So if we hit Control S to save, I'm going to save it into the 360 player video or folder that I created a while back, and that's near my wherever I saved the Oculus Sample Framework. We're just going to call this reverse sphere. Oops, I can't spell, as usual. So go ahead, click Save the Blender file. And you can export it as an FBX if you want, but since we have Blender installed, we can also just use a Blender file. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead, close Blender. And so we have the reverse sphere in here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that into my project. That'll take a couple seconds, and boom, now we have that. And you can see all of the settings here for the model. It's nothing terribly fancy. We can now go ahead, drag our sphere in, and it's set to some position. I'm just going to reset the rotation and also just scale this thing up. Not to 101, to 10. Perfect. So 10 by 10 by 10. Just move it out of that room. And you can't really tell right now that the normals have been reversed, but I'll show that in just a second. And to just kind of get this movie player started, we're just going to have to copy the components from this movie surface. So specifically, we're going to want the movie player sample script, and we're going to add that to this game object. I'm going to get rid of the animator. Whenever you import in models, it usually adds an animator by default, which we don't need. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy the audio source, put that on here. So this is going to play the audio of our movie. And then we just have to make sure that we have this movie surface HD material. And for that, you can actually just find the reference if you go to the mesh render, click on it, and then all we have to do is just drag that onto here. And basically, that pretty much sets up our sphere. So now if we hit play, what'll happen is it'll now play the video. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to go ahead and name this 360 player. Click on the assets and then just drag this to create a 360 player prefab. So that just saves it, and now we can jump out of this scene. We don't have to save it. And so we've created a fresh scene here. I can now go ahead, drag the player into this new scene, and all the settings are saved. I'm just going to quickly position it, keep the scale the same. We don't need a directional light because for our player, we don't really want it to be affected by light, and that is specified because it's already an unlit texture, or unlit material rather, and which basically means it's not affected by any lighting in our scene. And I'm also just going to center our camera, which is going to be our VR camera within the sphere. And with that, we've pretty much created our 360 player. Now, we obviously need to provide a 360 video to go along with that. And before we do that, just to make sure our adding and moving stuff around is a lot cleaner, I'm just going to quickly go ahead and delete a bunch of these folders that we don't need. So specifically, the only thing we need in here is this movie player folder. So I'm just going to move that to the assets. And then I'm just going to delete everything except plugins and streaming assets. And let me explain why I'm doing that. So now that we have that deleted, so once basically let's explain how this 360 player works. So specifically, it has this audio source here, so that when it reads in the movie, it'll then play the audio through this source. And then the magic of it is really this movie player sample and then also the material. So the movie player sample, what it does here is you can specify the name of the movie you want to play, and it finds that within your streaming assets folder. So this folder, basically, if you want any files to be in your executable at the end without having been compiled, this is the place to put it. So then go ahead and put your movie here. And specifically for this plugin to actually work, you need the MP4, which is this file, as well as an OGV. So you're going to have to convert your MP4s or whatever file type you have to an OGV. and that's just specific to how they have implemented it to work with the PC side as well as the Android side. So not a big deal. There are plenty of converters that you can find online, but that's just one caveat to using this. And that's pretty much all you need to do, and then it just textures it across your whole sphere, and that's perfect. So that's why we need streaming assets. Plugins is specifically, you need that for Android, and then the movie player is where the script is. So that's basically the bare bones of what we'll actually need. So at this point, we actually need to just get a 360 movie, and I'll also show you. So my friend Hassan is actually the one who pointed me out to this Oculus Sample Framework, and he has basically what we're pretty much building here. He has that open source on GitHub. I'll put a link to that on our website as well as the description, and so you can check that out, download it in case you don't want to build this. But I think it's a cool learning experience just to jump into Blender and do a little tinkering as well as into Unity. But yeah, so he's done that here, and he took a video from 360 Heroes and also already converted that to OGV, and that's also part of this GitHub folder. So we can go ahead, and I've already saved that here. It's called Cannon Fire, and we can go ahead and drag that into streaming assets. So pops in really quickly, and so instead of the Henry short, what I'm going to do is just name this Cannon Fire. And so yeah, that's the only pretty much change we have to make. And if we go ahead and hit play, we can see the video playing here. You'll notice the frame rate's a little choppy. That's partly due to the fact that I am recording right now, and also I think for some reason on my computer Unity is having a little trouble encoding, or I guess decoding, movies. Let me know in the comments if you have issues with that. I think it's a little odd. I've tried also Unity's movie textures, but they also seem to be a little broken, so not sure if that's just a bug or something weird is going on, but it'll work fine in mobile. I've tested that out, so don't really need to worry about that. And so yeah, we basically now have a scene that can play a 360 video. How awesome is that? And so let's just call this the 360 scene. Go ahead and save that. And at this point, the only thing we really need to do is set this up to run for virtual reality. And that's actually also really easy. So if we go to build settings, and I'm just going to go ahead and select everything with Control A and then delete it. And then just click Add Open Scenes to add our 360 scene in here. I'm going to switch to Android because I want to build for mobile. And that happens really quick because we deleted all of the unnecessary assets for our folders. And then I'll click Player Settings. So for this, going to enable multi-thread rendering and GPU skinning and virtual reality support. So that defaults to Oculus. And once we do that, I actually have my DK2 set up. So I'm just going to grab that really quickly. And as you can see here, we can basically just move my head around, and it's as if I'm in a 360 scene. So that's all working. DK2 or CV1 or the Vive, they're all great choices for debugging really quickly when you're connected to the PC, because Unity supports that, and then you can just test in the editor what's going on. And then if you want to just port it over to mobile, then that's also a good testing spot after that. But those devices are really good for enabling those rapid prototyping, which I think is really important. So yeah, basically we have this set up for the Gear VR since we are already set to Oculus. So before I make a build and then actually show you guys what the end result is like, I also want to show you if you don't have a Gear VR and you want to do this for Cardboard, or you want to do this for Daydream, which should hopefully be coming out soon. So hopefully what will end up happening in future releases of Unity is that you'll just hit this plus button, and then there'll be a Daydream or Cardboard support that you can add in. But if that's not the case right now, so what we're going to have to do is actually drag Google VR into our project. So this will take a little bit of time to get in, like probably a couple minutes. But what I want to talk about while this is loading is why you would ever actually want to create a 360 video player. especially within Unity. And I think the important thing to realize is it allows you to add in and play around with like 3D assets, maybe a little lighting if you want to, but you don't need to play with that. But I think the really cool thing is, say for example, you have a 360 video where you're on a snowy mountain and coming down this hill. You can simulate, what you can do is simulate a particle effect, and we'll add that in right now, although it will look weird with the scene. But you can simulate a particle effect coming down and then being surrounded by you. And then it'll give you a nice depth perception and make the person actually feel like they're in this snowy environment. And you won't get that with just stereo. Well, even with stereo, you won't get, so you'll not get this with mono 360, and you'll get a really bad sensation of it with stereo 360. But with adding an actual particle system in there, you'll get a nice range of depth for where snow is coming from. You can add a wind simulation in. There are a bunch of cool things that you can do. And so now that we have Google VR actually in here, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly, the only thing we actually really need to do is just drag this in, and then in our player settings, just disable virtual reality supported. So now if I go ahead and hit play, we now have this with Google VR. So if I press Alt and then drag around, I can just kind of view what it would look like in Google VR. So you can make a build of that and then get that into your phone, which we'll do. But to go back to that point of particle systems, what I can do to just add that really unique part, like that YouTube or any other the 360 video players can't really provide you, is just that customization. So that's located right here, particle system. I can just go ahead and rotate this. So let's just rotate it by 90 degrees. Set this to 0, 0, 0. And this is just a lousy snow effect I'm doing right now, just using the default values. You can obviously customize this a lot more, and that's not that hard to do. But yeah, we can just move this here. And yeah, so you'll get you can even see this right now in the preview here. But yeah, it'll kind of feel like snow is falling all around you. And that's just a really neat thing that you can't do with those other platforms. So if you really want that customization, I think this is a really cool way to do it. But other than that, now that we have that up and running, I'm just gonna, well, first I'm gonna move this up a little more. But then now what we can do is just go ahead and click build. So I'm gonna go ahead, create, let's call this a 360 build. And I usually create a build, we'll create a builds folder for this. I usually do. I was about to not, but might as well. Let's go ahead, save that in here. Take a little bit, and I'll cut and then jump into VR once it's ready. All right, so finally got a build up and running on my phone. And as you can see here, I got the stereo view. And unfortunately, I'm not able to do a screen capture because one of the downsides of using the Oculus Sample Framework is that they disable a bunch of screen recording third-party software. So unfortunately, can't show you full resolution on the screen right now. But the nice side is that those optimizations help to actually get you 60 FPS. So that's really cool. But the next best thing to do is actually just kind of show it to you in the camera. And you can see the particle effect that we added. And again, this is something you won't be able to get with the same depth perception and just that feel of being in the snow without actually customizing it yourself in your own app. So I think that's a really nice feature. And yeah, you can see the scenery, and it's just a nice particle system. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop this into cardboard. Always make sure to test it out. And yeah, got it running nice and smoothly here. This is at 4K, so it looks great. Like it's not like it matches the resolution that we want it to be. So nice and crisp and super awesome. And I have to say, snow is not a bad feel. But yeah, we have it running, we have it working. It's super awesome. Not that complicated to do. So if you want to play around with it, you can easily follow along with this tutorial. You can also make sure to check out Hassan's GitHub repo if you want to just download something and just play around with it. But other than that, let me know if this was helpful by liking or subscribing to our channel. And that's it from me. This has been Fuse Man. and I'm signing out.